So, good morning everyone, good morning class. I am your teacher Alberto. So, for today, I will be sharing you about the short story of Flik the Inventor. So, please listen up. So, after this, I will ask you a few questions if you really listen to what I just read. So, the short story entitled Flik the Inventor. So, this is the title of the story. So, Flik the Inventor. Written by Victoria Saxon. So let's start. Flik the Inventor. Princess Dot and some of the blueberries stood outside Flik rooms in the ant hill. Poop, whiz, gulp came the noises from inside. As always, Flik was trying to invent something to help the ant colony. Maybe we should ask them if they need help, Dot suggested. But before anyone could answer, there was a loud thump. Flik bounced outside of the room, landing at Dot's feet. Flik muttered as he stood up and brushed himself off. The flinging mechanism must be too tight, he said. Flik was so deep in thought, he didn't even notice Dot and her friends. He marched right past them and back into his room. Well, Dot said, at least we know he's okay. The next morning, Dot saw Flik at the edge of the fields with a funny-looking machine. Hi, Flik, Dot said. What you working on? She asked. Oh, hello, Princess, said Flik. He smiled happily. This is my pickup and mover machine. How does it work? Asked Dot. Here, let me show you, Flik said as he helped Dot up into a rock. Then he started his machine. Soon, an arm on the machine reached out and grabbed Dot. That tickles, she said, giggling. Suddenly Dot felt herself being lifted into the air. A moment later, she landed safely on the ground. Wow! Cried Dot. Look how far I moved. Excellent, Flik said. I'm glad I adjusted that flinging mechanism. Otherwise, you might have ended up on the other side of an ant island. Just then, Toiny appeared. Flik, Toiny said. Why aren't you collecting food with the rest of the worker ants? Hello, Toiny. I was hoping you'd ask me that very question. Flik replied. You see, I have invented a new machine. Would you like to see how it works? Toiny was angry. We don't have time for all those silly inventions. This work to be done. We need to collect foods, Toiny said. But Flik tried to explain, just to get to work like the other ants. Toiny called as he stomped away. Flik hung his head. Don't worry, Flik, Dot said. You'll figure out some way to use your invention. I just know it. Yeah, it must be good for something. But for what? Flik said, as he walked out to the fields to work. Later that night, Flik sat in his room, trying to think of a useful invention. Suddenly, he got an idea. He worked deep into the night. Early the next morning, Dot found Flik outside, looking intently at a large stalk. Flik, she said, you'd better get out in the fields with the other ants. Toiny's been looking for you. Dot said. Sure, I will, Dot, Flik said. But wouldn't you like to see my latest invention first? It's a stalk choker, Flik. You're gonna get in trouble, Dot warned. You're supposed to be collecting food. Yes, Flik said. I will, right after I try this out. Stand back, Princess, Flik said. Flik started up his machine and set to work. Moments later, the sock was chopped neatly in half. Aha! Flik cried. It worked! How do you like that, princess? But Dot didn't answer. Tony did. How many times do I have to tell you there's work to be done, huh? Cried Tony. But, Tony, Flik said, look at this. It's my new stock chopping machine. We don't have time for this. Tony insisted. But I'm sure. Flik began. We don't need to chop stalks. We need to collect food, Tony told him. Flik's antenna dropped as he went out of the fields to join the other worker ants. That's all Tony thinks about? Harvesting food, Flik mumbled to himself. Then Flik stopped short. That's what we need, he cried. A harvester, a machine to collect food. Flik turned around and raced back to his room. He looked at his pick-up and mover machine. Then he looked at his stock shopping machine. What would happen if I combined them? He said. Flik thought out loud. I guess there's only one way to find out. The following morning, with his new invention strapped to his back, Flik headed toward the fields. He smiled as he watched two ant children run past him, playing tag. Then he waved to some workers ants collecting food. Flik sighed happily. He knew that his invention would save the worker ants hours of working time. In fact, Flik thought he might become something of a hero. Flik tried to get stirring attention, but Tony was too busy talking to Princess Ata, and Princess Donut was nowhere to be found. Flik, one of the worker ants called out. What crazy things did you invent this time? Ha ha ha. The other ants laughed too. That Flik, one said, is always thinking of useless stuff. But Flik didn't mind the other ants teasing. He was busy starting up his machine, then he cut down a stalk. Moment later, the flickering mechanism launched dozens of pieces of green into a basket. Flik's machine worked. Hey, cried one worker ant. That's your pickup and mover machine? That's right, Flik said proudly. And it's connected to your stocking chopping machine, said another ant. Uh-huh, Flik replied. Wow, shouted the worker ants. Yup, I put them together and make a harvester, Flik explained. Now, one ant can collect as much food as a whole bunch of ants put together. Hooray! Cried the other ants. 3 cheers for Flik! Flik grinned. He had done it. He had finally created a really useful machine. So, that's the end of the story. Flik the Inventor, written by Victoria Saxon. So